Hello, everyone. Happy lunchtime. It is Tuesday, July 12th. It is a beautiful day here in Michigan. My name is Doug. Brief introduction for those who don't know me. I've been at Integer since February of this year. Come from a background of manufacturing software and startups, and spent a little bit of time in healthcare, and worked as a consultant and as a developer and as a pretty much everything within the software industry. I got my start in early 2000 um, when I started building computer labs for Oakland University, and then I worked in the automotive industry doing the same thing for several years after that before taking a huge pay cut and going and working into software startups. So today's webinar is not really a technology related thing per se, but more so about uh, sort of what I've learned and what I'd like to share about what I've learned about some recent examples in the overvaluation of some of these, very high-profile companies or people who have, been very much fueled by their very specific and sometimes rage-fueled sense of entitlement or absolute uh, belief that they are right in what they were doing and their passion, following their passion. Um, so, what do I mean by founder is not the product? In this post Steve Jobs world that we live in, um, I I do not believe that passion is the motivating factor for anything, for a career, for a company, for a product or a service. It's always okay, no matter where you're at in your career, right out of school or as a seasoned veteran. It's always okay to ask, what are we doing? Are we sure that this is the right thing to do? And I'm going to base this off of four somewhat high-profile examples, but then give some anecdotal examples of things that have happened to me in the past that shed a little bit more light and color around how I've dealt with these kind of things. So based on these four examples, what are the things that I noticed that are similar to things that I've experienced in my career, and what can we learn from them? A lot of this is motivated by the fact that here at Integral, we have a very fundamental belief structure and a mission of the company, which is, cornerstone of kindness, humility, and accountability. The kindness and the humility part is what I'm going to focus mostly on here, in the transparency, in the focusing on facts and data. So in this post Steve Jobs era that we're living in, rather than this roller coaster excitement of following a very charismatic leader, what if we focused on a principal leader that does what's best for the product or the customer, or better still, the employees and the team members? So what if instead of building this impassioned hype around the market value of the company or the how revolutionary our software is or our product is, what if we focused instead on building trust with our customers and delivering sustainable value? Before we get into that, let's look at several examples of people who did not do that and what can we learn from them. By now, I'm sure we've all heard of catfishing and what that means and the dangers of online dating. But there's also this rising phenomenon of job fishing or invest fishing in the case of some of these examples here. Basically, it all boils down to this. You've been bamboozled. We've all been tricked. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I don't know about you all, but there were several points in my life, even when I thought I was never going to happen again, when someone approached me and said, "Hey, can I get you to come to this? We're going to have this meeting at 6 o'clock at night at a coffee shop, and I want to share with you the value of owning your own business." And you walk into it and you realize, oh man, damn it, not again. I got fooled by another multi-level marketing scam. We've all been bamboozled before. So I'm going to give you four terrible tales. You guys can chime in, please. Don't feel free to put chats or questions. I will keep track of the questions in chat. Feel free to chime in uh, of these four tales that I will tell. Why I think this happened, and then what can we learn from it? So why do I think that these things happen? Fundamentally, I believe that it's very close to the sociopath test of a complete lack of empathy center, but also combined with this lack of empathy and this lack of kindness, there's really a lack of experience or talent or focus on talent or what a person can actually do. People often, in the case of these terrible tales, people often put all of their eggs into one basket, which is either their charisma or their charm or their passion, and then try to find a bunch of shortcuts and quick tricks and how do we get rich quick type situations. And rather than nurturing a company through its natural challenges, just saying that it's worth something doesn't necessarily mean it's worth something. A company is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. That's true pretty much with everything. So, complete lack of experience and talent. And when I say experience, I mean going through the time it takes to gain the experience to know how to do something and have the talent. Experience is talent over time. And having the empathy and the kindness of while you go through that and you learn all of that experience, you put yourself in the shoes of those people that you've worked with. Personally, I've worked with everyone from the CEO down to the third shift supervisor at a manufacturing facility. And I've learned from every one of those people. And I've learned how to talk to all of them and be kind to all of them, from the shop floor to the top floor. All right, let's get into it. The reason that these first two people are in quotes is because that's not their real name. Red flag number one, not their real name. Oh boy, what's going to happen here? The other two people, that was their real name, and what they did was a lot worse, actually. So no one has probably ever heard of this guy, this faux socialite, but he did create back in 2015, 16, created a design agency called Madbird in the UK. And what happened was he recruited all these people to sign up and be graphic designers and marketing analysts and promised people after a probationary period that they would make money eventually. He claimed that he had worked at Nike and that he had all this modeling experience and experience with agency work, and he created this beautiful website. And turns out not a single client contract had been signed after several months, about 8 months, an 8 month period. So he hired a bunch of people with the promise of work eventually. And we'll get into this a little bit later on because I've experienced the same thing. Well, this will be good for your experience. Put in this time, put in this time, put in this effort. The promise of something. Stole a bunch of stuff from everyone else on the internet, including Nike, and created this false persona. And if you want a little indication of what that means, so on the company website, the person listed as the chief graphic designer was actually a Getty stock image. Didn't exist. Was definitely a real person. Was not employed there. Also, this guy that was the managing director was some guy in another country who had no experience in graphic design or managing an agency and was a beehive maker in another country. Subsequently, all of these people on their entire leadership team did not exist. They were real people, but they did not work at this company. This company was not something that exists, much like his modeling experience. So it's very easy to create something like this with a $10 Photoshop template, but the reality is this is an actual copy of that magazine, not this. This is just one example of the breadth and depth of lies that this person created. This person created this entire persona that he was the Steve Jobs. He was quoted several times as being the Steve Jobs of his era, but it was all a lie. So, before disappearing into the ether of the internet and never appearing again, at least in this form, he left behind about 100,000 pounds worth of work that he never paid people, and the promise of several visas to come work in the country. So left a lot of people, a lot of young adult professionals in a real lurch by creating this whole persona. All for what? To foster his ego because he liked being in charge of an agency and telling people that he was. Yikes. If you want to learn more about this, there'll be a lot of links in the sources. You can read the article on the BBC and watch they did an investigative video about this. So yeah, Devin, go check it out. There's a lot more to it than this. He stole a lot of stuff, and then when he was confronted, much like a sociopath, when he was confronted, he denied everything. Oh, this is a surprise to me. It's like, well, no, where they showed him like you took this from here. What do you have to say for yourself? Oh, that's news to me. Weird. For those of us who have watched Inventing Anna, which is a wonderful story, or watched the podcast, or listened to the podcast, um, we know the details here. But for those who haven't, one of the things there's two things that stood out with this story to me. One is I want to create a Soho House style club. So Soho House is a membership-based club that you can join. They're in Chicago. Did he get caught, jail or anything, or did he vanish? He just vanished. They couldn't find him. He just vanished into the ether. So you could go in the story actually. Um, yeah, totally vanished. Um, the interesting thing here too is that if you read the article, I agree with this. The pandemic did change the way a lot of us worked. Um, you know, for all you know, I'm in a wood a wood framed office here with a window there, and but I don't know. What do you know? I allegedly took those photographs. you know, so it's a good read. I think he vanished. No jail time. No jail time for him. Um, but still, high stakes. I mean, you bamboozled some young adults. Anna, on the other hand, is still in prison in jail, county jail, which I think is fitting for this German heiress. Um, she's sitting in a New Jersey detention center awaiting extradition. She'll probably get extradited to Germany. Excuse me. There's two things that stood out. One is this idea of it's like Soho House, but dot dot dot, right? I'm sure in the course of our career we've all come into contact with people. Certainly I did when I was running my co-working space because people came up to me and said, "Oh, it's like this, but dot dot dot." I want to have Facebook, but dot dot dot. It's like just use Facebook. Like you're not going to invent it. But it was in her case, it was all a complete lie, right? She pretended to be a German heiress with all this money, and you, I, I'm not sympathizing here because she did bamboozle a lot of people out of a lot of money, and there were criminal charges brought. I mean, that's why she's sitting in a county jail. But her flaw here was, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but she really wanted to short circuit, going from having nothing, essentially having nothing, being a German immigrant, a first generation German immigrant, to having something and building some sort of Manhattan-based persona of being someone. I mean, she left her first magazine that she was working at after a year because she's like, I'm not getting anywhere. We've all been there, but part of it is you gotta slog through it, like to make yourself, especially in Manhattan. I mean, you really gotta slog through it. I mean, I've never spent a lot of time working there, but I have spent a lot of time working in Chicago. Very similar way. You gotta slog your way through it to get somewhere. Now, can you do it a little bit faster now? Maybe. She basically bamboozled a lot of rich people out of a lot of money to open her facility, to open her foundation, which is basically a social club with art and philanthropy, maybe? Question mark. I just think she really liked the lifestyle. So the second thing that happened was when they interviewed her lawyer, his her lawyer stated rather emphatically, very earnestly, well, we all lie. We all fake it till we make it. Well, hold on a second. Time out. No, I don't. Do not cast that aspersion upon me, dear viewer. No, I do not. A lot of us don't lie. A lot of us don't fake it till we make it. How about just make it? How about no fake it? So, for those who have seen this, is there anything out that stood out in Anna's story that I might have missed, that people reacted to? Anyone else who've seen it? Um, a total ruse that lasted, I think, about 3 years or so until it finally caught up with her. Right? This is not a sustainable lifestyle to keep borrowing from other people and not paying people back and skipping out on the bill and all this stuff and bamboozling like the um, the gentleman who portrayed the loan consultant and the banker was Anthony Edwards, the guy who played Goose in Top Gun. Um, he was pretty close to giving her, couple, 22, 23 million dollars to open something. Yeah, agreed, Bailey. Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm trying to get to is that it was really close. Like these are like seasoned veterans in the financial industry um, that were almost fooled. I mean, she certainly fooled her friend group, right? Because that was, you know, uh, $275,000 worth of all these things that she stole from her friends and these other influential people like Martin Shkreli, some of these other people. Um, Absolutely, absolutely. And it's deeply unsettling, Step. Their 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 dead-eyed lack of empathy is disturbing. And I've met several people like this before where upon meeting them you're like, wow, this person really has their stuff together and they're onto something. But then you start to peel back the onion and you realize like, oh wow, that's a rotten core in there. They cut corners because they're excited to be consulted. Yes. I think this was Bailey. I think this was a personality thing. I think this was this, you know, I know that when I am, this is going to sound weird, but when I am with my German friends, right, or I'm with my friends from, the former Yugoslavia or other parts of the Slavic world, we all behave very differently and we speak in a very different way and that can be somewhat intoxicating for people. And so I think she leveraged that, for these, very sort of very boring accounting folks that were like, yeah, sure, I'll give you $22 million. So yeah, six-figure stolen loans and include schemes that have resulted in a free trip to Monaco and travel on private planes. Yikes.com. Well, she's still sitting in New Jersey, so good luck. My personal favorite. This was very poignant to me because at the time that WeWork was opening, I was opening my own co-working space called ShareSpace. And if you watch the movie with Jared Leto, there's a very quick scene where they're at a whiteboard and they're listing out companies that they want to go after. ShareSpace is one of them. That's my only claim to fame. Um, Now, whether that happened or not, probably not accurate, but probably the person writing the script probably just Googled co-working spaces and just listed a bunch of them. So I have no relation to the film whatsoever. Um, it should be noted this was not criminal per se, right? This was not the overvaluation of this company is not criminal. Well, okay. um, it's a it was he had a vision, right? He grew up in a kibbutz in Israel, which is essentially a commune type situation. um, Best of intentions, and we had similar ideas when we opened ShareSpace, which was collaborative, um, working together, sharing resources. But the reality of that situation for me quickly just kind of dissipated because it's like, no, everyone just needs a place to work, rent a desk, you know, say hi to people everywhere, and then just kind of focus on your work. So that's what we turned ShareSpace into. We had an open floor plan, and then we changed it into like individual offices because that's what people wanted, and that's it. That's we all, we had a barbecue every month. That's it. That's good. It was a small company, and I was happy with what it was. On this hand, this was, very much like, he kept saying that he wanted to elevate the world's consciousness. I'm sorry, what do you mean by that? Um, you're renting desks, you're renting offices. Um, so yes, again, not criminal, but huge overvaluation, which does have an impact in the financial market, right? If you do something like this and you file your S1 and you're brought to the attention of the SEC will, be impacted and change some of their behavior in the future. This definitely had a impact on, unicorns in the future. Unicorns being, billion-dollar or more companies. Um, it did have an impact on that, but I think that's for the best. Um, Eventually, the lifestyle caught up to him. If you want to laugh, look at their original S1 filing with the SEC. The S1 is the standard accounting document that you file with the SEC when you're going to file your IPO, your initial offering. Um, they actually took most of their expenses off of their balance sheet, and they moved them into a different column called community adjusted EBITDA. Well, what does that mean? What he did essentially is they took all of their expenses and said, "Oh, those are not expenses. Those are investments. Those are marketing investments. Those are building investments." It's like, yeah, you can't do that. Here in the United States, we have something called generally accepted accounting practices that is enforced, in some way by the SEC and by the accounting firms of this country agree, like, here's what we're going to do. You can't just make up your own rules. And by the way, when you file your S1, don't make it look like a resort brochure. Just fill out the form. At the end of the day, you're really putting a lot of young adult professionals, at risk here. A lot of people that worked for WeWork, racked up a lot of credit card debt in the promise of a future that never came. Um, a lot of the people that invested, I mean, it was mostly SoftBank. And the reason that SoftBank invested in WeWork is because their managing principal felt like he lost out on the original internet boom. Okay, so he was kind of late into the game, and he thought that something like this was a very trendy thing that is going to be multi-billion dollar, 5x, 2x, or 5x, 6x sort of thing. So the reason that he invested in Adam, aside from Adam being completely relentless about trying to get this money and buy up all this real estate in New York City and all over the country, was because he felt that he was going to eventually make a lot of money here. But then once the market heard about it, and certainly once the SEC heard about it in Wall Street, it all came unglued. I mean, it's just you're renting desks. Like, just relax. You're not revolutionizing shit. The real punch in the gut here too is that he walked away with about 1.7 billion dollars, which is a shame. Which he promptly invested into crypto. So, jokes on him. Uh, any other anecdotes about WeWork that I haven't covered? Any sort of issues or things that you've experienced? Great location. I've worked there before too. But wow, what a guy. Okay, so speaking of dead-eyed and lack of empathy, um, this was probably the most. This is probably the most painful, sort of more human-centric story of all four of these. Um, Primarily because her chief scientist committed suicide as a result of this fraudulent behavior. At the end of the day, the Edison device didn't work at all. Um, it didn't. It might have performed a couple of tests, but it certainly didn't do them with only a couple drops of blood. The blood had to be diluted. The very painful part is, and one of the things that stood out to me, which I felt like I had to write something about this, was the portrayal of her going to do trials. The way that she thought the trials were not necessarily trials that were, governed by a medical board, and actual trials of like, going through a trial that's a scientific process, which you don't get results in right away. The scientific process of going through something takes time and effort, right? It doesn't happen right away. Science doesn't happen right away. It takes time. She would go to clinics in rural areas and do trials, basically try the device with real cancer patients and fill them with a false sense of hope, and then skedaddle and then never come back. That's what motivated the first whistleblower to not only leave the company but say something to someone, right? If you see something, say something. The level of security that was implemented at Theranos should have been a red flag of its own. Like, what do we? Okay, I get it. Yes, it's a medical device. We have HIPAA. We have all that stuff. But however, why is there so much security around the CEO's office? Um, that should have been a red flag. So the big thing that stood out to me was, using this device that didn't work on actual cancer patients. That's number one. Number two, chief scientist, you know, God love him. He drank himself into oblivion and he committed suicide. His widow is now suing Theranos in a separate lawsuit for wrongful death. The biggest thing here, though, was just the amount of lies and fraud from the beginning, based on the amount of money that she, again, back to Anna's thing too, is that as far as promising young woman, great charisma in a male-dominated industry, holding her own. She was really good at that. She was very good at having that cult of personality. And it kind of devolved into an affectation later in life, but um, basically bringing something that was, yes, very exciting to people, investors who usually invest in boring things. But it turns out the promise of the future was just that. It was just a promise. It was nothing real here. They actually would take and put Theranos stickers on the Siemens machines. These Siemens machines, I've worked with them before. They're ginormous machines. We had them at a hospital I worked at, and it takes forever to produce any sort of result, right? Still, even now, like you go get your blood result. Oh, let me give 5 days. Okay, that sounds about right. I kind of want it to take 5 days, frankly. Let's make sure it's right. Let's make sure that we're not, I don't know, misdiagnosing real cancer patients. So, Sonny, her husband, whatever guy, he actually was just sentenced, I think, for 20 years just last week. Her sentencing is in September. So, terrible situation, but hey, legal system works. All right, who cares? Bunch of rich people lost money, and some people lost their job. Big deal. Well, this doesn't just happen in business and technology. What does this mean? What do I mean by this? What I mean is this complete lack of empathy combined with an extreme sense of self-worth and uh, passion and earnesty and just no question to whether you are right or not. So, for example, Paulo here was a surgeon and performed groundbreaking, revolutionary stem cell surgery on 8 patients. 7 of them died, completely reckless. And it took them probably 3 years to find this guy. And his wife fled the country, and they eventually caught him and prosecuted him. We may or may not have seen this podcast, Dr. Death. The first season was about Christopher Dunch. The TV show on Peacock was very good as well. Uh, Although I didn't like seeing Pacey from Dawson's Creek portrayed as Dr. Dunch. But yeah, just performed all this back surgery, unnecessary back surgery, killed 2 of his 37 patients and maimed every one of them else. Uh, Again, just you cannot imagine this happening, but it unfortunately happens all the time. People are so convinced that they are right, and it takes a long time for someone to stop them. The worst case about this was Dr. Fata. So Dr. Fata, over the course of about 10 years, what we know about is 6 years, the last 6 years, but was prescribing chemotherapy to 38 patients who were healthy or didn't even need chemotherapy. And was submitting $34 million to fraudulent claims to Medicare. How do I know this? Because I worked at Blue Cross during the time that it happened. This is why Blue Cross created their fraud department, which partnered with local law authorities to find and prosecute people who were committing this type of fraud. There's another story of a guy here locally in Michigan. By the way, Dr. Fata was from Michigan, where a gentleman had an office building in Pontiac over here. I'm using quotes a lot today. And was submitting, $200,000 a year, 250, and then got greedy and started doing, let's try to do 2 million. Let's try to do 3 million. And got away for it for about 7 years until he was caught. Dr. Fata did the same thing. He was doing it in terms of like 10 million, 10 million, 15 million, and then he got really greedy and submitted something for, a pretty big number in 1 year. And that's when it all kind of came unglued. Dr. Fata's wife fled the country and they still haven't found her. She should be indicted as well because she was culpable. She was working there in the office with him. So, pretty scary stuff. But surely, none of this human dumpster fire behavior has affected me personally. All right, buckle up. I've experienced this behavior too. In 2006, at my first ever startup, the first startup I ever worked at, we had hired a marketing firm to do. I was hired as a graphic designer, and then I quickly became a programmer. But at the time, we had an outsourced marketing department before we created our marketing department that we were paying. And throughout the entire situation, as soon as I started, they were just constantly belittling me, telling me I didn't know what to do. They always do it this way. They've been doing it for 20 years. They were fueled with rage and just absolute certainty that they were right about the way they were doing things. And I would start to question, well, I know that doesn't seem right. You start to see those red flags and you go, well, I don't, what this is this. And, so 6 months later, the founder of that marketing firm was arrested for embezzlement. Turns out I was right. He was working. So we had a marketing director who was working there, who owned a marketing firm and was paying himself. And then instead of paying his employees, he took all the money for himself and then left the state. So I was right. It smells like a fish. It's probably a fish. In 2010, after doing about 60 hours of experience work for a revolutionary new startup that would use this new thing called QR codes on product labels. Ooh. With grand promises of stock options and from the CEO of the company, which was a guy in his bedroom. The company folded, had about $250,000 worth of debt, and I never got paid for that 60 hours of work. So Pro tip, don't ever do things on experience because you can't pay your mortgage with experience. Lastly, in 2015, I was working at an agency, and this is the funniest one. Uh, we had a senior vice president who was basically running the agency. It was the principal for the agency, and we had an opportunity to do a pretty good sizable chunk of work for a casino in Arizona. And I kept asking him over and over again, do we have a signed statement of work and a down payment and a commitment? Basically, do we have an SOW? Because I have 10 people over here who are ready to start their work, but I am not comfortable starting this project without a signed statement of work uh, and a down payment. To which his response was to flip the conference room desk, throwing everything around the room, and screaming and walking out of the room and saying, "Well, and I'll find somebody who can." That was the last time I ever talked to him. Later that year, that company was sued for over $1 million worth of damages from the casino, or breach of contract, actually. So, yes, this stuff can happen. Okay, with the 20 minutes remaining, why does this happen? Again, people are fueled by hubris and ego with a complete lack of empathy. That combination, that algebra, doesn't work. Without any experience or talent or empathy or kindness and just pure charisma and tons of shortcuts and quick tricks, eventually it's going to catch up to you. And it's going to send out a lot of red flags with the people that you're working with. So I'm not saying that charisma is bad or passion is bad, but you know, any extreme amount of anything is not great, right? So moderation in every form, except for moderation. So what can we learn from all this stuff? I'm very much a fan of Mike Rowe, Dirty Jobs, the way I heard it, um, and a couple other programs and books. Great guy, great podcast. Um, One of his biggest things is be wary of all earnestness. We've all met people who are very earnest about how absolutely they believe something, whether it's for the good or for the bad. I favor facts and data over absolute belief. That it's a little bit more of a centered, focused, pragmatic way to get through anything, life, career. This idea of faking it till you're making it is pretty dangerous. I would rather focus on time and talent, right? Talent over time equals experience, rather than following your passion, right? Again, can't pay your mortgage with passion. Uh, it's okay to be good at something and make money doing that thing that you're good at, um, whether or not you're passionate about it, or not. It's up to you. The choice is yours. And then nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. People forget that life is an open book test. It's not like college. We have all the answers and we have them available to us. So ask for help, trust your mentors, don't sweat it, have some grace, take it easy, keep it shiny side up. It doesn't have to be a roller coaster, right? That's not what really it's about. So, this idea of earnesty is dangerous because it's kind of creepy and makes me feel uneasy. I'd rather be kind of right in the middle of the road and focused on pragmatism and facts. What do the facts say? Whether they're good or bad, what do they say? I mean, make your decision based on that. I'm a huge fan of Adam Grant. People. I'm not going to necessarily read this directly, but lack of character, said a different way, lack of character plus, extreme, arrogant, rage-filled confidence, it's never going to result in anything but disappointment. Um, you need to be, as a leader, you need to be focused mostly on humility and character and having some sort of principled virtues. And I struggle with it a lot too because I try not to spend too much time expressing my virtues or principles. I mean, sometimes you just got to shut up and focus on the work. But it's always good to sort of have those at top of mind of what's what those principles are. The most principled person is the best poised to serve. I believe that aligning service with leadership is important, right? If you're working at a pizza place and you're the general manager and your employees see you always on the phone and they go, "Hey, this guy's always on his phone. What's up?" "Oh, just so you guys are aware, I'm doing the ordering right now and I'm doing the timesheets." "Oh, okay. Thank you for that awareness. Hey, now that I'm done with that, I got some time to chop the onions. Why don't you and me, we'll chop the onions together, right? I'm the general manager. I'm running the restaurant. You want me chopping the onions? Yeah, sometimes you do because you're entrenching yourself with your team, and you're saying like, hey, I'm a team member too. Not having this attitude of like, I never touch onions. Um, when groups defer to the most assertive person in the room, they reward confidence over competence. Again, this is something I struggle with every day, which is making sure that I am staying principled, but also not being too loud about it. Like, I don't ever want someone to be like, well, he was the only person that said something, so well, we'll follow that guy. The danger with speaking with conviction is it can stifle critical thinking. Yes. However, there is a fine line between spending all of your time critical thinking and doing the work as well. And then lastly, Scott Galloway. So Scott was the guy who, when WeWork filed their S1, he immediately penned a very passionate piece about there's no way this company is worth any money. They're this much money. They're just renting desks. Very outspoken guy, and that's what tuned me onto him. So I've been a fan ever since. This idea, and I'm sorry, I'm going to curse a little, but this idea of following your passion is bullshit. Figure out what you're good at, and it doesn't suck that much. You got to embrace the suck sometimes. Life sucks, sorry. And right in that sweet spot of doing that thing that is a combination of what you're good at and what people will pay for, and not following your passion. Because again, remember, capitalism is okay. It's okay to make money at something you're good at, because that's how you pay your bills. You can't pay your bills with passion. So I firmly believe that happiness is a result of solving problems. Uh, I feel successful when I solve problems. That success comes from resilience, of being able to endure and persevere. I'm getting a new tattoo next week that says persevere. No kidding. Continue on, pursue, move forward. Having a strong sense of empathy and appreciation for the people you work with, whether you're in a leadership role or you're a team member, uh, good is not cheap and cheap is not good. What do I mean by that? I'm not just talking about money. Sometimes things take time and they take effort, and that effort hurts and it's uncomfortable. The result usually is something good. If you short circuit the uncomfortableness or the pain or the struggle, you're going to end up with something that sucks. It's never going to be as good as if you would have endured through it, uh, and gotten to a very strong sense of success through enduring that effort and that process. And there's puts and takes in every one of those things. You got to be willing to give up things. You got to be able to sort of share, and that gets to the give and take. The Adam Grant reference there in the chat as far as give and take. There's puts and takes. It's dials. It's you got to constantly be shifting those dials.